Good afternoon, Dobar Dan to Yves Galer. My name is John Bell. I'm the Director for the Research and Innovation Department of the European Commission on what's called a Healthy Planet. Everything to do with the living resources in the bioeconomy, from agriculture and fisheries and oceans to climate, biodiversity, the circular economy, and the great transitions ahead. I'd like to thank Professor Breslin for inviting me to meet with you and talk to you today at the first workshop on agricultural research and knowledge transfer in IPARD Western Balkans. And it's a great pleasure for me. I spent many happy years of my career working with colleagues across different parts of the Western Balkans. So it's a great opportunity to reconnect today. I'd like to talk a little bit about the European Green Deal and the post-crisis situation. We're dealing with a major transformative change needed to align the big climate and natural and environmental changes that are confronting us. If we look at the European Union and the European Green Deal's commitment to create the world's first climate neutral continent by 2050, we're talking about 3 decades of moving all of the European Union's instruments, policies, legislation, finance, research, investments, standards, and all the rest, and international and neighbourhood diplomacy to achieve this transition and to do so within planetary boundaries, so within the needs and possibilities of biodiversity and natural resources, and in a way that doesn't leave anybody behind, a fair and just transition. This is what the European Union is about, and this is what our work with you and our partners in the neighbourhood will be about over the coming years. And if you like, it's this great challenge we see. The pandemic is a first example of the challenge of our century, whichever part of our great continent you come from. It's the challenge of reconciling, on the one hand, the biosphere with the economy and the needs of society. And the biosphere, of course, we live through in different ways, in agriculture, food, in health, and so forth. And the economy has to evolve, given that we need to decarbonize and work in a more efficient way within planetary boundaries. So in all of this, research and innovation is going to have to play a much more active role as an enabler for the main areas of the Green Deal. And the European Green Deal is an array of policies set out to support this goal in areas like agriculture and food, in farm to fork, in circular economy, in climate change, in the adaptation to climate change, which is how we deal in a resilient way with all the changes that are coming to affect us in terms of energy transitions and mobility and so forth. And research and innovation has to become an enabler because the timeframes are relatively short. We may be running out of time in some of these areas, but we're not running out of ideas. And innovation and research has to be an enabler for things like climate, energy efficient buildings, mobility, efficient food systems, minimizing the impact on biodiversity, minimizing the impact of pollution, going to a post-waste economy, reducing the dependence on chemically based pesticides or on some of the fertilizers that are making such a big impact on our environment and on our climate footprint. So research and innovation in Europe will now take a much more proactive role to drive, navigate, and accelerate the transformation in this agenda. And as Dr. Breslin has probably underlined at many occasions, the response to this need for urgent climate action to kickstart the recovery, the European Green Deal was announced in September last, a specific European Green Deal call in research and innovation with a budget of €1 billion to address major issues, to accelerate some of the breakthroughs in these big areas that are identified in the Green Deal in a cross-cutting call structured to reflect those priorities. It's also structured to address the emerging challenge of aiding Europe's recovery in the wake of this terrible COVID crisis, with the Green Deal at the centre of our strategy. We've decided that we're going to make the transition and make the transition through this terrible COVID crisis we're living through, where science, of course, will deliver progress. But afterwards, in order to get the economy and society up off our knees, we need to accelerate the transitions to a green, digitally supported economy. So there will be more investment in research and innovation and human capital to address these common challenges, to reskill, redirect, rebuild, build back better, decarbonize, and make sure that it's possible for more and better positions in the economy to be possible on the ground. In our next framework program, which is called Horizon Europe, we will have as a key element in this, in these transformations, these 4 European Green Deal missions. And the missions are kind of moonshots that we had in the 60s. We had moonshots of getting a man or a woman on the moon within the decade. These are about these transformation earth shots, these great transformations in terms of climate and sustainability in some of the key areas that are confronting us. One is called a climate resilient Europe, preparing Europe for climate disruptions and accelerate the transformation to a resilient and just Europe by 2030. And that's about very practical things like those who have too little or too much water, where the food system will be under pressure because of drought, heat, where the weather will be extreme in terms of flooding and heat, whether we will have issues in terms of uh, risks to human health from pandemics in public health or from forest fires and others. All of these things need to be thought about in advance and prepared for. The second mission, Mission Starfish 2030, restoring our oceans and waters by 2030, is again an attempt to address the entire water system, the oceans, the sea basins, the rivers, and so forth, and to work on their restoration through decarbonisation, through ecosystems restructuring, through cleaning up pollution, and so forth. And then there's a very important one for you and I part in the Western Balkans. Caring for soil is caring for life. Ensuring 75% of healthy soils in the European Union by 2030, the restoration of the soil, the skin of the earth, the source of our productive bioeconomy, and again, research and innovation has to step up with new solutions that are sustainable, clean, and zero pollution. And finally, developing 100 climate neutral cities by 2030 by and for citizens. That is self explanatory, but again, it's a massive attempt to test and demonstrate at scale the kind of places and destinations our homes will be living in a few years. So these missions are aiming to solve pressing challenges to our society and are crucial to move forward progress on the Green Deal and indeed on our bioeconomy on land and sea. We will continue to support visionary researchers and entrepreneurs in bringing new, green, and digital solutions to the market through the European Innovation Council. The Innovation Council is an attempt to bring real support through accelerators and pathfinder grants for people with great new ideas but who can't find the funding to scale up the businesses. The Western Balkans researchers are well embedded in the European scientific community, as has been the case for some time. In Horizon 2020, as compared to FP7, there was a significant 50% increase in participation, involving more than 800 project participations and 480 signed grants. There's still room for improvement, as the Western Balkans investment in R&D on average is less than 0.4% of GDP. Investment in innovative technologies are needed to strengthen this research capacity, which in turn would increase the absorption capacity. They would increase GDP by 1% to 1.5%. That's very significant. This can be achieved if all countries in the region commit fuller to the objectives of the European Research Area, the ERA, and through increased participation in Horizon Europe. Horizon Europe will be one of the important instruments through which member states and associated countries can benefit to achieve sustainability and climate neutrality goals and revitalise their economy. Horizon Europe is trying to provide solutions for urgent, cross-cutting challenges such as climate change and biodiversity protection. There are also important opportunities that the instruments such as the pre-accession instrument, you call it IPA, I think, and the instrument for pre-accession assistance for rural development, or IPAR, that we're in here talking today, offer. The Western Balkan countries need to strengthen their internal capabilities to be able to use fully all the opportunities that Horizon Europe and the other European programmes offer. This is very important, and we're willing to work together on this. I would encourage cooperation and networking both in the Western Balkans and with your fellow European partners. And here I want to identify one initiative which is about the bioeconomy, which is the central part of most of our economies, which brings together all of the different natural resources and the value that is produced from them, from agriculture and fisheries to food to residues to waste and water and so forth. And there's an initiative called the BioEast Initiative, a really important flagship initiative, which is supporting the development and deployment of the bioeconomies in the member states from Central and Eastern Europe and in the Western Balkans as an example of a macro regional collaboration. I think this is an initiative that is worth looking at and worth engaging with. And such an approach, I think, would help the Western Balkan countries identifying and addressing common challenges and priorities. So I encourage you to engage with the BioEast initiative and see if there are ways and means in which we can support you, that can support you in making this transition forward through partnership across your bioeconomy research and innovation needs. So to conclude, I want to thank Professor Breslin for inviting me to speak. I'm confident that during today's workshop you'll gain a lot of additional insights and knowledge, and I wish you a very, very productive day. Thank you very much, and goodbye.